there are three main vocabulary words that we need to know. There's fraction, numerator, and denominator. So the standard I was teaching today has to deal with fractions and the numerator and the denominator. They need to understand that the numerator is what they're being asked about. It could be the shaded pieces, the unshaded pieces, the blue pieces, etc. And then understanding that the denominator is the number of pieces in the whole. It also has to deal with partitioning the denominator and understanding that as we cut the denominator into these pieces, the pieces are getting smaller and the number on the bottom, the denominator, is getting larger. At the very beginning, I started off with just a review of their prior knowledge. I needed to make sure that they had a good understanding of the vocabulary because they were going to be using it a lot throughout the question.
The denominator is on the bottom of the fraction, and it's how many equal pieces there are in one whole or group.
We did a mixed pair share, and that got the students up and moving and talking to students other than the ones at their desks.
The denominator is how many equal parts are in the group.
I used a bakery as a way to engage my students from the very beginning. It also gives them a real-world example of where they may see fractions and where they may have to cut equal pieces outside of the classroom. So today we're going to pretend like you are all bakers and you want to be a part of my bakery. So I have to make sure that you have all of the information in your head that you're going to need for today. After that, we did a review of equal shares. I drew a picture on the board and I asked, how could I represent that 5 people each got a piece of this pie? And one student said, oh, you just cut it into 5 pieces. So I drew it incorrectly on the board. There we go, I have 5 pieces. That's a lot of hands in the air. What's wrong, Brianna?
They have to be equal or else no one would have an equal share.
And it was funny how quickly so many of the kids are raising their hands to say, no, Mrs. Maupin, you did that wrong. There has to be 5 equal shares. Can you say that with me?
All of the pieces must be equal in one whole pie.
There you go. And then after that, we did an act it out where I asked kids to come up and hold pieces of the pie as I was cutting them. They even got to fold them and tear them so they could see that these 4th size pieces were becoming smaller as they were cutting them or tearing them apart. And then after that, they went back with their groups and they got to manipulate a pie again by cutting it. And then we did a stoplight, and that was just using all of the knowledge that they had learned in this lesson and applying it to a word problem. The stoplight is something I used a lot this year. It's a great way to tackle these hard word problems that students tend to read and say, I don't get it. So the first part is that they have to read the question to themselves, and then they extract all of the important information that they need, and they restate the question as a statement so they can fill in their answer and make sure that it makes sense. Every step of the stoplight has an individual part and then a cooperative part. So that was the individual part for the red light. The cooperative part allows them to take what they did and explain it to their group and own their knowledge.
I extracted. Josh and his brother ate 2/3 of a pea, 2/3 of a pie. 3 sisters shared a piece, and then I restated the question. Each sisters got.
And then it moves to yellow, and yellow is just drawing a visual. And visuals can be drawn all different ways. For the pies, they could have drawn the circles, they could have drawn squares, they could have done rectangles. And then they get to share their drawing, and they get to explain again why they did it that way. And then the green part is the go for it. It's to solve the problem the way you think to solve it. So it allows them to think about how they want to solve it, process and apply what they've learned throughout the lesson. And then again, they get to explain to their group how they solved it. And it's good because sometimes students are not solving it correctly. And after they've heard it 3 different times, they understand what they did wrong. And it's important for them to understand what they did wrong so that they don't make that same mistake again. And then from there, we did a gallery walk so they could see everyone else's work and they could add and comment on how everyone else did. They either agreed or they disagreed.
We agree because there are 12 pieces in that whole, and each sister gets 1 piece. So our fraction is 1/12.
Word problems are tough. However, they're a great way to see if students are applying what they're learning, and they're not just answering a one-word question. They're having to explain why, and they're having to take all the information, use it in their head, figure out what the question's asking, and then giving an answer. So it's not just what's the answer, you have a whole problem that you have to read and think about before you can give an answer. So it's really just application of what you know. Very nice. So how come they're only getting 1 of 6?
Because it said how much of the whole pie did Amanda. It's just talking about one person.
Very nice. So Amanda only gets 1 piece out of the
6.
And what happened to those pieces as you cut them? As you cut those halves up?
They got smaller.
Why did they get smaller?
Because you're cutting the denominator is getting bigger, and the song is the bigger the denominator, the smaller the piece.
My advice to parents is to just use fractions as much as possible. Get your child into the kitchen with you, help them cook, ask them to pour 2/3, or ask them to pour 1/3, and then how could we relate that to needing a whole cup? Well, there's 3 parts in the whole, and we only have 1, so we need 2 more. Fractions could be there. It could be telling time. If you're doing a craft at home and you need 1/4 of yarn, let them show you 1/4. You're not going to be able to go out into the world and have everything memorized. So you need to have the ability to figure things out and use what you know and apply it to these other situations.
We can